Hello, everyone. This is Eric Sweden. Welcome to this webcast on the new state CIO operating model. This time out, we're focusing on the four forces model that we have used in multiple publications and presentations to help describe the environmental context that creates a need for a new operating model. The four forces model was created by Integra Applied, and we have been allowed to use it extensively. Facilitating our session today is Mr. Patrick Moore, Managing Director for Integra Applied. And our very special guests today are Mr. Mike Leahy, who is Secretary of Information Technology for State of Maryland and also Treasurer for the NASCIO Association. Mr. Todd Kimbriel, who is Deputy Executive Director, Chief Information Officer for State of Texas, and also a past board member of NASCIO. Welcome, panelists. We're really glad you're here.
Great to be here with you, Eric.
Patrick, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Thanks, Eric, and thanks, Todd and Mike. And it's a pleasure to be here, a privilege to be a part of this esteemed group. This is the next normal. We've heard a lot of people say the new normal. I heard the phrase coined the other day that we're more living in the next normal of web conferences and moderated video webinars and the use of technology we've long had, but I'm not sure we ever really appreciate it until an event like this comes around. Eric, I appreciate your tee up. I know NASCIO over the years has done a lot of incredible work promoting the role of the state CIO, helping the CIOs with tools to explain the role inside an enterprise, helping to mature the role and grow the role, and really facilitating the CIO's efforts to help modernize state government and improve the citizen experience. I think what we really want to get into today is how state CIOs are dealing with the current pandemic and how some of the work NASCIO has done, in particular with some of the work around the CIO as broker model or the new CIO operating system model, how these steps they're taking apply, and how the tools NASCIO is building and developing can help a CIO when they face these types of challenges, especially the ones that are unforeseen. So with that, I think we're just going to jump right into some questions. Todd and Mike have been great in recent weeks sharing their wisdom and their knowledge and their experiences with the NASCIO community. We're glad that they're here with us again today and look forward to getting into some questions with them. Todd, why don't we just start with you? Here we are in the middle of a pandemic. We're having to do a lot of things, some of which state governments prepared for, some of which they weren't prepared for. I heard you talk a lot the other day about something about the workforce and how you've been managing the workforce and that how you were in fact prepared for that. And maybe spend a minute talking about that. And I think that's going to give way to some of the other topics we're going to talk through when it comes to the four forces and the things that have been bearing on you as you've been in this role, not just doing your day job, but also trying to prepare for events like what we're seeing in these interesting times.
Sure. Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Eric, for having me and Michael here today. We appreciate the opportunity to share our experiences and what's going on in our world today. I would describe our situation right now and the theme for how we're responding to the current situation is business as usual. We have established a perspective that COVID-19 and work from home and shelter in place are not excuses for not doing the job that we have to do every day. So we've established a pretty high standard that does not allow for our employees and our staff that have firm deliverables to step down from meeting the tasks that they've been assigned to do. You know, at times like these, citizens expect their government to be there for them in every regard, more so in a time that we're dealing with right now. So it's even more critical that we find ways to make sure that we are delivering those services and that we have positioned our workforce to be able to work successfully in whatever the climate is that we find ourselves working with. I will say that we were very prepared for this as a result of the H1N1 situation about 10 years ago, where at that time we were ill prepared. We realized that we were ill prepared, and so we endeavored to get laptops in everybody's position. We embraced telework under normal operating environments and encouraged people to telework 1 or 2 days a week. And so generally and broadly, our workforce was prepared for this eventuality. In fact, the Friday before the state and city issued a shelter in place, we took that Friday, March 13th, and had a test and had 100% of our workforce work remotely, just to see under a controlled circumstance exactly what the impact would be on our customers and on citizens and the services that we deliver. And that day, our operations went just as normal as we expected them to. We certainly, going into this, we can control what we can control, but we certainly have concerns about things like the last mile and everybody working remotely. What is the capacity of internet, for example, and broadband in local communities? And would we have situations where workers were not going to be in a position to effectively do the job that they have to do every day? So we, anticipating that, we put together an inventory of things like MiFis or little remote devices that would allow certain people to not be dependent upon a poor home internet connection. So we were prepared this time around, and I would describe that we are operating business as usual every day. And there were some agencies, of course, that were not as prepared, and they went to some pretty radical steps of having their employees actually carry their desktops and their monitors home, so that they had equipment to work on in their home environment. Pretty rare. We certainly took steps to help agencies acquire laptops on an emergency procurement basis with some bulk buy programs that we did to leverage limited supplies. Obviously, the manufacturers were not fully prepared for this as well, with a whole bunch of remote equipment on hand. But we were able to organize some bulk buys to allow some agencies that had not fully prepared to actually respond very quickly to having a remote workforce. So sorry, a long-winded answer there, but hope that got to what you're looking for.
No, not at all. It's not long-winded at all. I think it's fascinating in this time when people think nothing is normal. The attitude you have there at DIR is this is business as usual. We're ready for this. The technology works. We can make it work. We can be safe at home, and we can still get things done. And the people of Texas need us to do our job. What a refreshing attitude in these days. And I think, Mike, it's a great segue over to what you've been experiencing. Here we go. We see governments beginning to take steps to quarantine and stay-at-home orders. You see it coming. You're beginning to have conversations with the governor's office and agencies. What was going through your organization's efforts to get ready for this, both before it got here, as well as what you're doing currently to help manage through this pandemic?
Absolutely. Well, let me start by saying that I knew I had good people working on IT for the state of Maryland. Now I am firmly convinced that they are great people. There was not quite as much in place as Todd had. We are very federated, as Todd is, but we, in less than a week, had to figure out how you get folks with 17 different VPN systems to operate in a way that they could communicate together. We had the same challenges. We have bought thousands of laptops in the last month and imaged them and distributed them to various agencies. The work that had to occur continues to occur day in and day out, but there have been a number of unique challenges, as I'm sure Todd and others could speak to. No one anticipated, because of the shelter in place possibilities, what impact that would have on workforces. Here in Maryland, we had more unemployment applications the first day than we'd had in the last 2 years. And so there were folks that clearly, because they're distressed and they're looking to government to solve things, immediately gave up on the IT solutions and started getting on the phones. And so we have built a number of models to work with keeping those folks informed and attempting to speed their applications. We had an example where the state set up a small business loan program. And our Commerce Department came to us as an approval agency with a solution that they had spoken to vendors about that would have cost 7 figures and would have taken, 2 to 3 months to implement. They were doing about 100 applications a day at that point. And our folks went over, spoke to their people, worked on the workflows, and 8 hours later, we had a working application doing 17,000 applications a day online. So again, we always talk about people getting their job done, but the beauty of this is it shows that these people are not only good workers, but they're creative and they're dedicated.
Now, those are great stories, and it's great that the technology and the organizations that run the state's technology is in the middle of helping respond and deal with it, because you see that example, and it's a great lesson learned for all the work that NASCIO has been focused on over the years. Mike, you bring up a great topic in the idea of how states have been responding to the demands on their systems. Lots has been written in recent weeks about old systems suffering under the weight of these applications, particularly unemployment systems, are under a lot of scrutiny right now. But then go back a few years, and I think if you look on most NASCIO top 10 lists, the topic legacy modernization is always there. We know that we are state CIOs. We know these systems are old. Our agencies know they're old. We know it's expensive to fix them, but if we don't fix them, we're going to have a problem in the future. Well, here we are, and we're having a problem in the future, only the future is now, and suddenly people are saying, well, gosh, what happened? And now we can certainly tie in the idea of these political forces that CIOs have to help navigate and trying to help priorities get set across an enterprise. So maybe this is probably a prospective discussion, looking ahead. How can a state begin to manage it? But I think the discussions that have led up to where we are also very relevant. Maybe give us your insights on what you're seeing from a modernization standpoint and how we might use these current situations as a way to change that discussion, to show the need to spend money in areas that we know at some point are going to break or be put under a lot of pressure.
Absolutely. I think there are 2 points I want to make before we delve into that question specifically. And the biggest issue we face in a federated system is that folks don't necessarily trust us. They're used to doing things a particular way. It is always easier to say we will fix it tomorrow because it hasn't broken yet, and tomorrow becomes next week, next month, next year. So the circumstance we face today creates 2 challenges, and the first is we are giving people significant reason to trust us. We are solving problems using technology and working with them as the subject matter experts to address particular problems. Here in Maryland, I started programmatically about a year ago saying to people, do not bring me a technical solution. I want you to bring me a problem in English. I don't want to talk about technology. I want to figure out what it is you're facing, what is the challenge, what are the bottlenecks and the problems you have. And after we define that, we'll talk about how we can apply the technology we have in place, or to your point, how we can modernize across multiple systems at the same time to gain those efficiencies and to gain that scale and that ability to analyze things. So with that as background, the second piece of this is because of the economy basically stopping, all states are going to face significant revenue challenges. And so we have 2 forces working in our favor. First, and most important, people are starting to trust us. And second, although it may mean spending money in ways people hadn't thought about before, we can demonstrate that the solutions we are offering today not only modernize the systems, but will cost less in the long run than running legacy systems that have outgrown their usefulness. And I'll give you a real simple political aspect of this. We talked about how these fit the four forces. Our finance system in Maryland is still based on a COBOL mainframe system. It was built in the early 1990s. The folks who know how to run it all could retire last week if they wanted to, but they're dedicated, so they're staying. But the issue is we don't look at changing it, not only because it's expensive, but because the decision to change it rests with our finance people, with the comptroller and his people. And the IT agency has to pay for maintaining it. So it costs them nothing. As long as it works, they're happy with it. Suddenly, now that we're going to talk about these solutions that are going to force people to work together, we're going to look at the economics of all of this in a way that we haven't in the past, and I think that's going to bode very well for all the states. And NASCIO has been preaching this for years.
Yeah. No, great point, Mike. You know, Eric, while we're moving over here to get Todd's insights on that, why don't we put the graphic up of these four forces just so we have it as a point of reference. And the idea here is simple, that state CIOs are facing every day a series of forces and to what might be going on inside an organization or an enterprise. And I think we've all had the experience of trying to get funding for a program or dealing with a new technology, and that it's not always as easy as it feels like it should be to do something. But navigating all of these forces now becomes the charge of the CIO. And so I think, you know, Todd, along these lines here, you spoke to the fact that you had used some previous experiences. The state of Texas had used some previous experiences to prepare for this. You've also been going through a major modernization over the years with your data center services, and now you're even moving that into applications. How do you relate those two, both what you're doing now from a modernization perspective, as well as how you took those lessons from years ago and applied them to help you move things forward?
Sure. So, you know, to echo Mike's thoughts, legacy modernization and the movement into a new operating model is all about saving money in the long run. So we were very clear about the benefits of moving in the direction that we did, which is that we are reducing risk to the government, to the delivery of government services. We're saving the state money in the long run, and we're demonstrating in those two areas. We have metrics to demonstrate that we are accomplishing that every year by producing an annual report that reflects the benefits, the tangible benefits that we're seeing in these program areas. The legacy modernization issues are a challenge for every organization. So I think the way I think of it is, if you've got a 5-pound box and it's a really old 5-pound box, you build a brand new 5-pound box out of the latest material in the world, and what do you have? You have a 5-pound box. So you really haven't enabled anything new through legacy modernization. These legacy systems deliver the functionality that organizations need. So it's not being driven by a lack of functionality, it's being driven by technology upgrades. So there's a lot of heavy lifting that really doesn't deliver anything of new value to an organization. So it's a unique challenge in this one space that's very difficult to address. One of the ways that we did that is looking at, you know, kind of the customer, understanding the customer force here, understanding what they can and can't do, and understanding what are their barriers to forward progress. We build things into some of the contracts that we awarded in our next gen data center and our data center program that require our vendors to refresh 20% of the infrastructure every year. So a simple little thing like that forces the hand of the customers to work with the program team as we go through that every year annual 20% refresh strategy, where our program team works with the customers holding their hand. We take on the lion's share of the work. They obviously have a skin in the game because it's their application layer, but we work with them to help them understand what it is that they have to do to upgrade the application layer, the logical layer, as we upgrade the physical infrastructure that underlies that particular, you know, business system. And we talk about it in that regard. We talk about it in the concept of business system. We don't talk about it in the concept of, you know, 3 Linux servers and 2, you know, WebSphere servers and middleware, and we don't talk about it. To Mike's point before, we try and adopt business language when we're talking about the projects that we're doing, and how we move the needle forward for the customers. So far, to echo Mike's other point too, it's all about credibility and trust. So we had to demonstrate that we had the program inertia, that we had the program fortitude, and the program commitment to set out a path and to fulfill that path and fulfill that journey, and describe what is the outcome, where are we going, and make sure that customers have clear, transparent understanding of all of those things, and the direction we're going and how we're going to get there, and make sure that we had their buy-in and support. And as I said to Mike's point before, we did not necessarily have that in the beginning, and we had to earn that. But once you earn that credibility and that trust, it becomes much easier to implement these new programs, where in our current environment, we are now moving and offering voluntary services in the logical layer completely. So our next gen model now is moved into the logical space, so that we can offer application services, which in a very federated model that we have here is sort of the last vestige of data center as a service, or IT as a service, which is ultimately where we're trying to get to. So the customers have the ability to focus on things that really matter for their mission, that they can work on things that improve the delivery of services to citizens, and not worry about the commoditization of IT. So I think we've done a lot of good things. We're not done yet. We're moving in the right direction, continue to moving in the right direction. But generally, to tie it back to CIO as a broker, we are bringing these various services to the desk of our customer CIOs, and letting them share their services available for them to choose from, and understanding that, I say this a lot in Texas, that one size fits one. The services that we bring to bear for the Workforce Commission differ from the services that our Department of Public Safety has to use, and we have to be able to cover both sides. So we really look at kind of the option play to the highest degree possible.
Now, you covered a lot of ground there, Todd. Appreciate that. And I think, the idea, so much of what NASCIO has discussed over the years is focused on that credibility, and that if you can't deliver a result, you can't be expected to lead change or do something new, whether it's a modernization initiative or going out with a new technology or a new service that you want to bring online. And that message seems to be resonating so well with CIOs across the country, is you have to have that credibility before you can go out and do bigger things. And y'all have been a great case study in that. I'm thinking of shifting gears just a little bit, and maybe spending a little bit of time on the market and the forces that you're seeing in the marketplace. We're seeing an incredible response from the marketplace. Everything from auto manufacturers building ventilators to the way in which the technology suppliers have had to increase their capacities for web conferences and making sure that just the internet holds up, which it has very well. So Mike, why don't you spend a little bit of time here? You're getting pounded every day by the market. Everybody has a new solution to help you during this crazy time. Some folks you know very well and you've done work with before, and you're probably leaning on them a lot. Other new players, you're trying to figure out how they might fit in. At the same time, there are procurement rules that are being relaxed. You're trying to move quickly. What's kind of a broad question here? What do you think the impact is going to be long term on your state's operations and relationship with the market after this pandemic response has ebbed a bit?
Well, I'm going to start by saying I have no idea. Having said that, I do have some expectations, and a big part of moving forward with market forces and with change is the entire idea, as our governor has said, he's focused on customer service. And so, although my customers are all state agencies, obviously his customers and the agency's customers generally are the citizenry. So I am really thrilled when folks in the market bring me ideas, bring me potential solutions, and then back it up with their analytics, because they have a capability to look at a far broader market, look at aspects of how the citizenry might be impacted that I just don't. Second, I am incredibly gratified, thankful, blessed, whatever you want to call it, that we have had numerous people, clearly that ultimately have a profit motive in place, volunteer to do things without worrying about, as you put it, the constraints of the procurement process. And I think the beauty of this is we've all gotten so tied up in procurement that we want to make sure everything is perfect, every I is dotted, every T is crossed, that we presume bad faith where an emergency like this demonstrates that that's just not how people operate. And that in fact, if folks aren't putting forth a credible product, word of mouth is going to stop them far faster than a contract would. So I'm very hopeful that what comes out of all of this is that twofold. One, we're in the middle of surveying our citizenry about COVID, about unemployment, and other things. Citizens will get the idea that they can interact with government as well as with private business using tools like texting and the internet that typically have been the purview of young people. We're starting to see more and more people into their 40s and 50s actually using these tools. And then from the government standpoint, we have this amazing opportunity in that, as you put it, doing teleworking and doing meetings remotely, we don't have the constraints that people have to travel and get 6 people in the room at the same time. If we're interested in something, we can call a meeting and talk to the principals that day, which has not historically happened in the past. So to your point, I think this is becoming the new normal, that folks didn't think about using these tools in this way in the past, but now this is more convenient and in fact far more actionable than many of the solutions that they thought were normative in the past.
No, agreed. As long as some of us can remember to turn off our phones and texting notifications when you're going through the process, which is still a learning step. I think, we've long taught, or NASCIO rather, has long talked about in this broker concept, is that it's not the broker in the sense that you're enabling transactions. It's that you're helping find the right source of supply with the right solution, and it feels like this is a real opportunity. And Mike, I'm riffing off your point that the old way of doing things is making sure all the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted. And everybody agrees you have to have detail, and the devil can always be there. But I think we're also learning that the management skills required in this new world of technology as a service are different than they were 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. Knowing how to manage a source of supply is a lot different than knowing how to manage a procurement process, and that the two are intertwined, that you have to be able to buy things correctly, but you also have to be able to manage them correctly. Todd, I think, you might, I don't know if there are lessons learned that you're seeing now through your experience in interfacing with the market through this current pandemic. Certainly, y'all have been on a journey of moving towards more of a manager of services and a broker of services than a hands-on doer of a service. What are some insights you can offer there in the type of skill sets that we're wanting to see more of from the technology organizations across an enterprise?
Yeah, we have completely gone into the deep end of that pool in terms of managing services and not delivering services ourselves. We definitely describe our organization as we are not an operational organization. We're actually more made up of contract managers and vendor managers than we are, and service managers than we are kind of operational technical people delivering those services. So the ability for us to be accountable for delivering a broader portfolio of services, of needed services based on unique and shared needs, both ends of that spectrum, is really our focus area. I would say one thing that because of COVID, we have seen an extraordinary outpouring of support from our vendor and partner community with offers of assistance from to your point before, vendors we know and vendors we don't know. And so one of the things that we've done, and I think this is two areas that are very representative of the concept of managing a service, is one, this bulk buy program that we do. So we have contracts that our customer agencies can use to go out individually and procure hardware. Well, the bulk buy program is where we actually go out and negotiate on behalf of all of the customers a unique purchase window that usually runs about 2 months. And within that window, our customers, we pre-negotiate a super high discount. So basically we get about 50 to 60% off the normal prices for things like laptops. And we organize that sort of purchase window for all the customers so that they don't have to go through, and they can benefit from the collective volume that we accomplish at the statewide level. So rather than 15 agencies going out and procuring 100 laptops each, we don't do the purchase for them, but we negotiate the deal and provide this bulk buy window wherein they can just place a PO and they get the advantage of the total volume of the state. Now, that was something that we did specifically at the beginning of the COVID crisis. The other thing is that our vendor community has been so supportive in reaching out that we had, and this is the kind of problem you want to have, I guess, we had too many offers. We didn't know what to do with them. So we actually built on our COVID-19 webpage, we actually built a form for donating either no-cost goods or services to the state. So vendors, we could point vendors to that form where they could go out to the website and submit their offer, if you will, of what service or goods they were going to make available to anybody that needed them. And then also a similar form for those that were willing to sell, not necessarily donate, but sell goods or services. And so we have a database in the back end now that organizations that have a need can now go look at all of those submitted offers and sort of match up, hey, I've got an offer here for, it's kind of like a mini market. I've got an offer here for reduced O365 licenses. I've got an offer for that. Oh, here I've got a need for that, right? So it facilitates the ability of one service organization to make a service known to statewide, and for the organizations in the state to be able to go in and actually evaluate those offers and make that connection between the supply and demand, if you will. So we found that that's a more formal way to go at managing the offers. I'm sure Michael's getting the same thing. I get 10 emails a day from various vendors saying, hey, I want to help, how can I help? And absent some formal way to manage that as a service, it's very difficult to sort of every email I get to simply throw it out to my CIO distribution list and go, hey guys, who needs this? So sometimes, when you look at brokering a service, in this case, the service is this sort of mini market of supply and demand of these free, offers for assistance. So that was definitely something that we've found to be very beneficial, especially during this crisis.
No, thanks for that. And I think we have a lot to see still, but I think that the way government engages with the marketplace is going to begin to change as a result of how we have responded and lived through this current pandemic. So with that in mind, let's jump ahead 6 months, a year, whatever it is, and understanding full well that we're in the middle of, the world's still in the middle of responding to and dealing with this pandemic, and we're not quite sure where it's all going to go. But we've had a lot of experience with it so far. You're talking to a new CIO at NASCIO, or you're talking to a new governor or a new legislator, and you're talking about the 2 or 3 things you would like to see change as a result of what we've experienced here, kind of playing off the inertial forces. Things have a tendency to stay at rest or in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. You are now the outside force, and you've seen some things work really well. You've also lived through some things that should have been better and that you had been maybe saying something about for a long time. Mike, why don't we envision that conversation? Looking ahead, you're talking to somebody who's going to have an influence over the direction of the state. What are some observations you might say that would say we need to improve this, or I wish we had done this differently? Here's how I'd like to change that.
Certainly. I think the biggest aspect of that, as you said, is we're dealing with inertia and forces that people continue in the same path unless they have a good reason to change. So my first piece of advice, and the advice I give myself every morning, is don't be afraid of failure. You're going to get a lot of no's before you get a yes. And is all that means is I haven't done a good enough job yet of advocating for the change that I want to see. And I'm going to learn from those failures, which I don't see as failures, because it's going to make it easier for me to understand what it is my customers need and want, and to build that relationship with them, to build that trust so that they can actually be honest with me about what the challenges are they face. The second piece of it is, as you said throughout this, if one is acting to not only broker services in the sense of give folks ideas, but to also lead them to the possibility of ideas they hadn't thought of. So let me give you a very simple example that is terribly complex, but simple to explain. What this COVID example of a pandemic has shown me and has shown my people here in the state of Maryland is we're going to have to find ways to be more efficient, more effective. And given that no one teleworked before to speak of, we had a few people, but very few did, and everyone does today, why don't we look at the potential for virtualizing the agency? As Todd said, we're providing management of services and of ideas, not actually providing the actual technical capacity in most cases. So what that leads to is, okay, how many buildings does the government have that we could access? Okay, what does it cost to maintain those buildings? Okay, a second example of that, as those of you who know anything about the Baltimore, Washington region, it's one of the most expensive places in the universe. And IT salaries here are very high in the private sector and very low working for the state. What this particular pandemic has shown me and has shown my people is that if we're going to start using telework, all of a sudden my market of potential employees is the whole country. And I'm sure there are folks in Idaho that would be thrilled to make what I pay in Maryland. And they're talented, but they've chosen a lifestyle and other aspects of their life that their talents aren't necessarily used to their full capacity. So again, being willing not only to think outside the box, but to think as if there's no box to think about becomes terribly important in looking at what's the next issue folks are going to have a concern about, and how do I foreshadow that, and how do I prepare them for that so that when it occurs, it's seamless in talking about how we're going to solve it together.
Yeah, could I jump in on that as well? So
yeah, please, absolutely, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is a moment in time, and it's our time to seize the golden ring, right? Which is, to Michael's point, now you've got everybody teleworking. You never had that before. I'd say generally that the public sector runs about 10 years behind the private sector. Guess what? We just caught up, right? So from a telework where private sector has embraced all the value and benefits of telework, public sector now, not by choice, but, and I would say that the reason why we haven't done it in the past is for fear of failure, or for fear of somebody not being productive, and it's that fiduciary responsibility for taxpayer dollars. Despite every report ever been written says, teleworking is more effective and more efficient than non-teleworking, and certainly, we have a greater concern now about the health and welfare and well-being of our employees, because we think they might be working too hard, and not, shut down the laptop. Don't just go in the kitchen and grab a half a sandwich because you can for lunch and then go back to work. Shut it down for an hour, get away, sit down, take a break, refresh yourself, and then go back to work. I mean, literally, there are a lot of little tips and things that we've done to try and help our workers be rational about how they go about doing their job. But so I think, you know, from a telework perspective, we've caught up to the private sector. We're there now, you know, but also cloud adoption. And if you look at private sector, there's a tremendous amount of cloud adoption that we haven't seen in the public sector. Well, you know, a lot of the changes that we've done over the last several weeks have been to help provide assistance for organizations move things to the cloud so they can take advantage of that elasticity of resources in the cloud. Our workforce, we talked about it before, our workforce solution was, you know, kind of we played whack-a-mole for 3 weeks trying to get it up to the capacity where it was meeting the needs of citizens. And it's because it's a complex, large distributed system that has a large mainframe component to it. You expand capacity in one area only to create a bottleneck in a different area. You address that bottleneck only to create yet a tertiary bottleneck. So, you know, through that process, we've moved certain elements of that solution up into a cloud environment to, again, take advantage of that elasticity. And I think those are the things that are the changes that I see I think organizations need to be really embracing in this moment of time. So 6 months from now, do not accept a return to normal. You have to accept this is the new normal and let that drive your focus of how you're going to update those legacy systems and migrate them to the cloud and you know, work in this distributed environment.
Now that's great, and y'all have set a course that I think a lot of states would be envious of. Certainly can learn from. I know all states are going to be contributing to this dialogue about how to make government more effective and how to learn from the current lessons. So we really appreciate your time today. Certainly, it's been an honor for me to be a part of this. And I think that we've touched all of these forces, but more importantly, we've touched on your personal experiences and what y'all are doing in your leadership roles to help navigate an enterprise that's responding to something that nobody saw coming. And to have lived through that and to have experienced that is something else. And I know that lots of people are going to benefit from that experience down the road. So thank you both very much for your service and for what you're doing to make government better. Eric, with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and I appreciate being a part of this today.
Well, we're glad you were here, Patrick, doing such a superb job of facilitating. Mike, thank you so much. Todd, the wisdom coming out of both of you is amazing. And I think this is transformational. Some of the things that you talked about, that's the future. And we really appreciate it. We're going to stay in contact and with you going forward, tap some more of your ideas. And we want everyone who's listening to this to stay in tune to NASCIO. We've got more publications coming out that are related to CIO as broker or the new CIO operating model. And we want you to stay tuned to our resource center for additional publications, webinars. We also have a resource page for COVID-related resources that we want you to tap into. We've had tremendous contributions from our corporate partners and states, and we've held biweekly CIO calls, and we've used those to identify additional resources. So stay tuned to NASCIO, and we will close this webcast, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.